we're back with another one of my partners, and I am so stoked to introduce you all to Adam West. I met Adam about 2.5 years ago. He had recently started his career in real estate, and I'm not going to spoil the story too much, but I'm just so stoked at the progress he's made ever since the time we connected, because he was still just trying to find his way in the business. And fast forward, just going on 2.5 years later, he is literally one of the top 1% of producing agents in his entire state. And, we're still building it from here on out. And everyone, Adam West is in the house out of Nashville, Tennessee. And if you're new, by the way, make sure that you subscribe. You do not want to miss these weekly interviews, because you're going to get some valuable strategies and insights and perspective of people that are not just in the industry today, but actually making it happen and creating lasting change for themselves and their families in the process. So Adam, brother, thank you for taking the time to hop on, man. I'm so excited to chop it up with you.
Absolutely, man. I appreciate you. I appreciate the invitation, man. I always love talking.
Absolutely, brother. So let's dive right into it, man. And really, even before we talk real estate, what was the journey like prior to real estate? I mean, did you have a career, or kind of what did that look like?
Yeah. So real estate was not my first stop. So Nashville's kind of known really well, known for two things: music. A lot of people know us for that. But there's also a lot of healthcare in Nashville. So I actually spent a lot of time on the healthcare business side of things. I was on the sales side doing business development and sales type of work for, about 10 years or so before moving over into real estate full time. I wish it had been sooner, honestly. I had bought and sold my first, investment property around 2012 or 13, I believe, here in Nashville. And I wish that the light bulb had gone off, to a greater extent when that happened. But, it's still it piqued my interest. It was something that I'd, in general, just being in Nashville, having grown up in Nashville and seeing the growth, being more involved in real estate was on my mind. I just simply was a little bit, I had that mentality of, this is what I do. I'm in healthcare, and then I'll use that to, maybe do some real estate stuff on the side. And, as life started to happen, right? And one of the things that was a big part of my kind of previously what I did for work was I did a lot of traveling, right? And my wife and I had our first in 2020. So I was trying to figure out, okay, how do I spend a little bit more time here closer to home? And also I was already kind of in a place where I was looking at what I was doing, and I was kind of seeing the trajectory, and I'd done it long enough to know that, if I kind of looked into the future and got exactly what I wanted, it really wasn't what I wanted. Right. There was time for me to be honest about, I can continue to kind of grind it out in this way. And I just didn't see myself getting where I wanted to go. And so around that time is where I, started in real estate, started off at a smaller firm here in town with folks that I'd known kind of previously. And, yeah, I'll stop there, man. I'm about to answer more than one question. So that's what I was doing prior to being in real estate. And yeah, I mean, I'm very grateful for that experience. So I do have, I came into this with experience on the sales side, developing sales process and doing this type of work, but it was in a different sector. And just am grateful that I managed to make the move when I did, because I just feel like now that I have, it's all the best parts of the things that I was doing in the past. And some of the things that I was I think for me that were most intimidating, which I think are probably pretty common, 100% commission and starting from scratch and all this kind of stuff. Those things turned out to really be more of a positive once I found myself in that position. And it's great. The sum of its parts works into life perfectly. And for me, when I look at the future now and I see, the different skill sets and the knowledge base that you gain from being involved in a lot of transactions and knowing your area, the ability to grow and generate the kind of, life that I wanted to prior is much more in my reach now than I think it's ever been, quite frankly.
Yeah, that's amazing, man. And so my next question was going to be why real estate, but it sounds like that's interesting to think about. Like you had something you were working on and doing for a career for so many years, but you didn't see a pathway forward, even if you kept putting your best foot forward in that opportunity vehicle to where you were going to build a life that you imagined that you would want to have. So is that really the key catalyst for why you decided to get into real estate, or was there any other factor there?
I would say, I mean, it really was a mix. There was a lot going on in life at that time, right? So it was a mix of feeling like I guess so. I would primarily that, but knowing that so let me back up, man. The only other piece of that I would add is just that piece where I guess theoretically I could have gotten there that other way, but what I was starting to see was the amount of time for that was much less in my control, like as I scaled, right? The other path, I gave more and more time up. I had more and more responsibilities. I'd have, more people to answer to, right? All those kind of things. Whereas this, I feel like the better I do at it, the better things go, the more opportunity there is to have greater flexibility and greater say into kind of like how you structure your day and your week. You know what I mean? Does that make sense?
Yeah, so it wasn't just the opportunity itself, but like also the freedom and autonomy to really be able to design your own life and work really more so on your own terms. That makes sense.
Yeah.
So let me ask you this, man, because you said something, that, hey, you got your license, you were connected with somebody already in the business who was a broker, so you decided to start there. Why pivot and change? And by the way, having talked to hundreds of agents, I would say that's like the most natural reason as to like, if you're going to, go with somebody, if you have an existing relationship, that's a very natural reason to go with whatever broker you decide to go with. And a lot of people, that's, really the core reason why they, start at whichever brokers they decided to go with. But why pivot, man? Why change? Like, cause you actually pivoted and, shortly after we connected, we ended up working together, and you ended up moving your license over to EXP and partnering with me and another one of our partners. But why make that change, and why EXP?
The big thing for me, so when I started out, the reason for going there, I think, like you said, was very, very much that kind of, I knew them. It was a comfortable place, nice, they had a nice office, and there was that place to go, and it kind of felt like I had this structure, right? I just didn't feel like I was off on an island by myself in some ways. But even though, and I didn't know what to ask for, and their model was very much like 100% commission, fee based, and they're a great brokerage, honestly. Like for that model, like I have nothing against them. They're great guys. They're growing well. I noticed. I just had this feeling that there might be one, I just needed to do more, right? Like I was starting off from scratch, and I had to be honest with what I was hearing was a little bit more of that traditional kind of timeline of ramping up. And this was as things were just incredibly hot, right? 2020, 2021, the traditional kind of pipeline building was a little different, right? It was such a frenzy. And so I just had this nagging feeling that I was, I knew a lot of people were moving to Nashville. I knew there was this huge in-migration, people kind of moving around. And yet I felt like I was not connecting in any way with those buyers. And so really just with the idea of like, I've got to figure out, historically low rates, nobody in my sphere of influence is going to like, they're all doing a refi right now because prices are going up and rates are low. So my sphere, those people early on were hunkered down. So I was trying to figure out, where do I find these people who are moving to Nashville, who are, on the buyer side of things. And that's where I started kind of looking around, got connected with you and Trey, and started looking at EXP. And I think for me, it was like, what is brought to the table for my business and making this move, right? It was less, I'd had a chance to see like, okay, here's the low cost option, nothing against it. There's maybe a time and a place for it depending on how things go. But for me, it was like, I don't mind, having a split or having a commission cap or whatever, having a little bit more there if I'm getting a lot more for it in return. And so with that open mind, talk to you guys. And the big thing with EXP for me right away was I saw that collaboration to be talking with other agents in other states who have clients that are moving to this area. And I saw it right away. And I mean, EXP, I'm forgetting some of the names of stuff now, but there were, and maybe I shouldn't mention them, but there are 2 or 3 services right away that I was signed up for. And I was getting, introductions to people who were searching in this area, working like serious buyers. And then also, on the EXP side, as I was seeing a lot of traction there from other agents that were looking for help in this area. So, I mean, just right away when I moved over, and I don't know if you remember, but I didn't move over right away. I sat down with you guys. I'd spoken to a few other brokerages in town. I had some family who had been in real estate the years past and kind of looked at those brokerages that were more like regional and saw what they offered, and then talked to y'all, loved what I heard, but then went back to that place where I already was. And I knew some of these people. There was something comfortable in like the way it was set up. It felt very traditional. And it was about a month before I acknowledged that I just couldn't shake the feeling that I was missing out on something. For whatever reason, I just, why not try? And I think that was a big thing for me too, because I feel like, as a broker, it's easy to put the blinders on and forget that the value you bring to the table, and the fact that there's no shortage of people who are going to want to take a piece of that check when you've done your work. And so, it costs $25 or $50 maybe in the state of Tennessee and a couple signatures to move your license from one brokerage to the next. Like, you got to get a few signatures from departing broker, your new one, and then wait 24 hours for the association to process it. And I just kind of finally got to the point where if I had, like, this is just nagging me and I can't stop thinking that there's probably, that I should at least try this to know what the difference is like. And so, with that in mind of like, if this is just the worst thing ever, obviously, like I'll be able to come back. Like, they're going to be happy to take my fees or office, desk fees or whatever you want to call it, like back and forth. And I'm so glad I made that leap, man. I mean, I remember it was maybe Labor Day weekend. And I was like going on vacation with my family. And, again, this was pretty soon after. I think I'd only been at that other place for maybe 3 or 4 months. It was a pretty quick move. And within, in that 3-month span of time while I was there, obviously, and it was as promised, I hadn't seen any introductions or any leads or anything like that. And I wouldn't have expected to. Through the various kind of channels that I had access through, all of a sudden at EXP, I saw, I started getting, dings on my phone. I started having people to call and getting introductions to people who were moving to this area. I mean, it was phenomenal. Right. And you still had, not all of them worked out. It's not like they were all perfect, opportunities, but it's still like, one, for a new agent, it was a lot of great reps and having conversations and qualifying people. And, but two, it really did make a real impact. I mean, the first, I would say the first 3 or 4 transactions I saw came through EXP introductions, and that's significant. So looking back on that, that first full calendar year after that, versus where I was before, being here, plugging into the different kind of opportunities that we had, it's made very much a bottom line difference to everything. It's been huge. It's really hard to imagine. And my wife every once in a while will kind of say this to me. She's like, that was a really great decision making the move over. Because when I first moved over, right, it's like you become a real estate agent and then 3 months later you're talking about moving brokerages already. My wife was like, are you like, what's going on here? Is this, She was just worried it was like something impulsive, right? But I could not shake the feeling that I was letting opportunity get past me by not taking that chance. And I'm glad I did, because again, I mean, it still continues to be, just being at EXP continues to be a differentiator for me when I look at, the opportunities I have to grow my business, as well as the challenges I'm facing, along the way, just given market changes and all that kind of stuff. And it's just, I'm very grateful for that. And I've never regretted making that leap at all.
That's wild. It sounds like a night and day difference, but specifically what I'm hearing you say is like the network. So it sounds like you were in I'd say a very common situation in our industry where you got a local office, you got the broker, you might have a few agents you meet and connect with there. But very practically speaking, how does that help you get more business in the pipeline versus you're describing a situation where you had a network of people that weren't even in your local market that you were able to tap into, and that started to fuel your business? That's incredible, man. Would you say that's like, I'm just curious, would you say that was the most beneficial thing about that you found operating your business at EXP, or what would you say that has been the most beneficial thing about that so far, operating here, especially, you're someone who has contrast on this. There's some people I talk to on here that like EXP's the only brokers they've ever been with, so they don't even got a reference point. But what specifically would you say that has benefited you in your business the most being here at EXP?
I mean, I would say that the first and foremost, right? Because this, I think, is always the true north for me. Like when I look at the revenue of my business, there's a quantifiable and significant portion of that revenue that is attributed to referrals and relationships that have come only because of EXP. I would say, I know last year, I don't know where I'm going to end up this year, right? But because it could be higher, but I'd say I know 2022 was probably in the neighborhood about 30% of the transactions I saw were a result of those introductions. And then this year probably end up being about the same, and I've also seen I've started to see my first repeat clients were some of my first introductions from EXP, right? So these are now people that I've gotten to know, and they've made referrals, and they're very much, and they've moved to Nashville. That's the other great thing, right? I stay in touch. I'm genuinely friends with some of these folks too, right? They're not just clients, right? And that's the amazing part, is that it's kind of hard to put a number on that at some point, So that's the first thing, is just seeing it hit the bottom line, seeing it hit the contract value, seeing transactions, on a regular basis attributed to that. And then I would say the second, the next thing for me is just the temperament of EXP, kind of the energy of it. I think you can, again, like I ironically, even though it's a virtual broker, there's no shortage of ways for me to connect and plug in with other agents and kind of have that battery there if I need it for ideas, for strategy, whatever. And I feel like sometimes I'm having more conversations with folks where I feel like, especially when things are slowing down, there's less of a buzz around that particular office, or there's less, you're seeing people move around, you're seeing brokers move. And I feel like one of the things I like about EXP is that it seems to, I know people are moving and all that kind of stuff, but I do feel like it's because it's not as beholden to some of the things that your traditional office and all that kind of stuff are around. It's managed to stay more consistent in this time in terms of staying positive and staying focused on what needs to be done, and the best tools to give agents at this time is like things shift or the seasons change, that kind of thing. And it just kind of continues right as I feel like I'm up against the limits of, what I know to do, where I need to look next. I have a lot of confidence that I probably haven't gone deep enough into EXP and what's offered to find that answer, right? I'm never sitting here certain that EXP is not offering me what I need. I know there is an overabundance of what I can take advantage of. And so it's nice to feel like when I do identify those shortcomings or those like areas where I need to, either increase my knowledge base or I'm just looking for someone to kind of help me think through a problem, I have absolute certainty that I'll find it if I'm willing to, diligently search for it within EXP. Right. And I've just never, that's the other thing. I've never been turned away from an agent that I went to, whether they were in my market or they were in another one. When I came to them, it was like, okay, I'm trying to retool or figure out this part of my business. Like, what have you done for this kind of stuff? I've never felt like there wasn't some sort of like collegial kind of collaboration there. Which is nice, because it's easy to get really sharp elbows, especially when things are a little bit leaner and not want to really be altruistic and help people out. So it continues to be that environment that delivers on that promise. That's a big one for me. One thing that always,
that's awesome.
Yeah, man. So,
you were going to say something else there?
Well, I was just it reminds me, I'm forgetting. So when you and Trey were in town, a couple years ago now, right? For that event, and you invited me over to that kind of after hours deal and gave me the passcode to crash I can't remember what it was, but it was like kind of after hours thing with all the folks who were pretty high up at EXP, right?
Yeah, it was a special event in a speakeasy, so a secret spot that like legit was not open to the public. But yeah, I know what you're talking about.
It was terrific, man. And it was full of, and I don't even think this was early on. I was a very new agent, and I was going to regular Tuesday and like Thursday calls for a guy who's in Nashville, a guy named Jay Nelson, who's a really big EXP agent, who's done really, really well. Super nice guy. And he had been hosting this call, and I was turned on to it from my mentor, and he was at this event, and he was sitting down talking to the CFO of the company. And I just wanted to walk up and say, hey, Jay, I appreciate these calls. Because being new, one of the biggest insecurities I had was just not knowing the language, right? Like not knowing how to have that conversation and not sound like show my hand that I was inexperienced when I was negotiating with, my counterparts. And that one of the things I really loved about that call was there was all that lexicon around like, how to frame things, the terms and language of the contract. And so it just, within a few weeks, I found like I was picking up language and ideas that made me look way less green, right? And just was actually learning a ton. And I just wanted to say, Jay, I really appreciate this. It's been very helpful to me. I'm starting to, I go up, I shake his hand, I go to say that to him. And our CFO, who's sitting there talking to one of his biggest, clients, so to speak, right? And is eager to probably talk to him about stuff, just like jumps up, puts me in his own seat, so that I can sit down and talk, one-on-one with Jay for, 10 or 15 minutes or so, which was hugely valuable for me. And Jay poured out some really touching stuff. I mean, he's got a few kids as well, and has gone through different phases when the kids were young, and I was had very young kids at the time, so just very impactful, and it's stuff I still carry around today. And it would have never happened if we had the type of CFO who didn't see a young guy come up and just want to say, hey, thank you, and was not eager to push that conversation and make it happen. Instead, be on his own agenda and want to talk about whatever he was wanting to talk about with Jay. And even if he didn't have an agenda, Jay Nelson is a phenomenally entertaining and just gregarious person. So even if you're not wanting to talk shop, like he's a great guy to hang out with. To give over his seat was generous just for that, right? And that was early on, and it set the tempo. And I think about that a lot as I see those examples a lot from other agents, from leadership, that there's this, the idea of like all boats rising with the tide, as opposed to feeling as if there's something to be gained from holding back. Right. And I love that about EXP, and it's never failed us there. Usually if I'm feeling like it needs to offer more, I probably haven't gone to it and gone to the group or reached out to someone or called my mentor to really kind of seek out. That's another thing, man. My mentor hasn't been on the hook to help me with a transaction for 2 years and 30 or 40 transactions, but he still picks up the phone whenever I have a question. We're good friends. I mean, it's just the general mood of the place has been so positive, man. it's hard to quantify that side of things.
Absolutely. I've never seen a culture like it, and it goes all the way up to leadership. It's like stories like you just described are not uncommon, between any of the corporate leaders or executives or, biggest names you would know of in the company. It's like that culture is very much across the board how these people are and interact. And, those are the kind of people that do well at this company. People who, want to kind of keep everything to themselves, and and that, like, they aren't always the best fit here. I mean, either they got to adapt and adjust and get used to our collaborativeness, or they just they don't really stick around if they're not like that. Let me think here. So I want to point something out though, because for anyone who's listening, I think they could, if they haven't already figured this out, like you're still relatively new to the real estate industry, especially in the aspect that we're building something for the long term here. But I want to point something out. So when you came on board with EXP, you were still working towards getting your first deal done. I think there's a lot of people in the audience that might be able to relate to that. You closed out that year. You got your first few clients. I believe you got your first, one or two deals done by the end of, your first few months on board, right?
I think so. I think I had my first one. Like right at the 5 or 6 month mark in that first year. Okay. Somewhere around that time.
Okay. But if I'm not mistaken, what was it? 2022 would have been your rookie year, correct? Your first full year licensed, active in the business, right?
Full year license, active with EXP in the business. Yeah. That would be my first one.
And so what did you end up closing that rookie year as far as production?
That year was just under 10 million in contract value. It was like $10
million just right at $10 million in volume, closed volume, rookie year. That's phenomenal, man. I don't know if, to what extent you realize this, but there's not a lot of people in our industry that have a rookie year like that.
It's, I'm grateful for it. I mean, again, that's where that definitely doesn't happen. I mean, it still would have been a good year, but it wouldn't have been, that I can account for probably 3.5 million that directly goes back to EXP referrals. I mean, that's a significant, that to me is when you look at a good year and you see it go a little bit extra, that to me is that piece that felt like I had I felt like I had an ace up my sleeve. So that part was terrific, man. And I'm very grateful for that. And this year, so 23 is, on pace, basically, year to date the same way. We'll see how it goes. I don't think, but I mean, I can point to specific, certainly have beefed up my side of things, but again, I can still point to transactions that trace directly back to either referrals that referred them, or repeat clients that were original EXP referrals, or just, new, introductions. So it continues, 2 years in a row now. It's had a real impact to the business in a way that's, honestly, more than enough to cap, right? I mean, both years I could have comfortably capped off of just the EXP referrals. For what that's worth.
Amazing. And because I think a lot of people, it's easy to have a thought, because you started at 100% brokerage, which for those watching, you probably know what that means. If you don't, that means there's not a split. That means you keep 100%. The broker makes their money off of flat fees in some way, shape, or form, per transaction, or whatever the case is. And it's easy for people when they just look at the surface. It's like there's a lot of people out there who can't make sense of why would you go from 100% if you're keeping 100% of your check minus a little bit of fees. Why would you switch that and go to a split where the broker is taking a percentage off the top, and like why would you do that? And I can relate too, because funny enough, I was at 100% brokerage prior to EXP. But what I wanted to point out though is, well, if you are attributing, like Adam is saying, 30 to 40% of his business easily came as a direct result of being plugged into the network, that he wasn't a part of that, that business would not even be there. Well, is that worth the trade-off to, okay, you're paying a split, you're not keeping 100% on every single deal, but now your business grows by 30 to 40% because you have something else that's fueling it that otherwise wouldn't be there. That's as a result of what the company has in place to help you win and succeed. See, that's the thing that a lot of people can't make sense at if they're just looking at the numbers. It's always more about, and I always tell people this too, it's not just about what you're paying. What's even more important than that is the value you're receiving. Because even if you didn't have to pay anything, if you don't get any value, like what are you really doing? Like it's, there's always a trade-off between these things. And so that's really cool to hear, man. I'm glad that you've had that kind of upside in your business personally, just by being plugged into what you are.
Yeah. And I think, your point around the cost of it, people do get really hung up on that. And even when we talk about like 100% commission shops, there's usually fees, right? Like there's a desk fee or there are definitely places in town that I found I could have saved $1 if I wanted to, but it's never as clear cut as, $0 versus 20% cap, right? Towards, that $16,000 number, right? So it's just, there's something in there somehow, even if it's not a large number. And that's the other thing I found was, if you're going to set it up and set expectations that this is more of a cost type model. So you're looking to save here and we're not going to offer as much value, then it really should be as cheap as possible. There shouldn't be all those other things baked in. Right. And I'm not saying all of them do that, but I know, for me, as I kind of looked around, that was one big thing I always asked about because sometimes I felt like I was making a bigger investment in EXP than I really was. And when I asked more about the fine print of what it would cost if I wanted, this plan or that plan, so that I have the metrics in a way that was better, usually like it really wasn't that much of an advantage, right? It wasn't as big of a gap as 100% commission equaled $0 and EXP equaled, 16,000. It was a lot more like there was a much smaller number making a difference. And I remember going through that with you and Trey, and it's still like, honestly, like if I was looking at just the number, if I was looking at just what I was going to save, I should have stayed where I was at. But it was, looking back now, it was such a nominal number, and looking at what the growth has come out of this, and not just, it's easy to start talking about the transaction side of things and get caught up. I always kind of like to look at the numbers because those are where my facts are that I just can't lie about, right? But as a newer agent, one of the things that I really appreciated and was hugely valuable to me was just getting those reps. Not just the fact that they were warm leads that I could actually work, the fact that they were work for me to do, and to get out there and start having conversations. This is one thing I would say to anybody who's new to the business is that there's just nothing too small. Like you will get out there and you'll work it, because if it makes you smarter, if it, gets you in front of another agent to kind of learn from them or to talk to them, if it gives you a shot at, learning from the transactional process, so long as you're not going to go into the hole, right, doing it, chase those down. And that was one of the things that I was pretty tenacious about, was making sure that I took advantage of the fact that not only was I getting a real opportunity to grow my business from a financial standpoint, but I was getting the best, in my opinion, on the job training of getting real life people I could go out and help instead of just educational stuff, right? Which I love about EXP. I mean, again, like with the EXP world, agents that you can meet. There's all types of different ways you can go about education. But I remember loving having that there because I was thinking, well, I don't know when I'll be busy, but I was so pleasantly surprised by how quickly I started seeing referrals. And that just, when I look at some of my peers who started around that same time, and I look at kind of our ability to, like, just where we are in our skill set and our growth, that's another thing you just really can't. I mean, it's hard to think about how big of an impact that was, because even some of the ones, I mean, it's like anything, right? The ones that pay the least are sometimes the ones you work the hardest on. A couple of my first early leads, they never went anywhere that I got from EXP, but they still counted to me significantly as experience. One got all the way to closing, and then like the day before, there were some financial questions, and it basically fell through. But it just, that was another thing that I really appreciated. Was just, there was activity right away. And I think that's, that still exists, right? Especially if you're in that place where you're really, really hungry to just get any traction and to start learning. Those opportunities, I see them out there every day, I feel like. So.
Yeah, that's a huge difference maker, to actually have opportunities so that you can not only get the income which people want, but like the actual experience you're going to need to continue to build upon it and to excel, in this career. But man, I'd be curious to know, man, on the flip side of things, like, what would you say has been the most difficult thing you've had to overcome since taking these steps to get started in real estate and really committing to it? What do you think the biggest obstacle has been along the way?
I would say, gosh, man, let me think about that. So I guess the biggest obstacle for me is keeping that pace, right? As you grow, is like, there's that right balance of, we're in an industry where you got to keep an eye on what's happening and try to read the tea leaves and know what market are you in now and what market are you going to be, right? You can't, it's dynamic enough that I don't think you can be too comfortable with how you're tooled to do business and where things might be going, right? And I think that a lot of times people who jump into this business, not jump into it, but are in this business and find themselves doing well early on, there's a lot of stories. Like if you go to EXPCon or Build or something like that, and I'm sure if you go to other, conventions, you probably hear that story of like, yeah, I started out and I just crushed it. I was making tons of money and, driving fancy cars and spending money. And then the market turned and, whatever. Or sometimes it's just like life became unmanageable or whatever, right? There's just that you can focus on the business. The business, is very much input output. If you're willing to work on it, it's going to grow. And I think the big thing for me is that patience of like, that first rookie year, as you called it, like scaled really quickly. It's been same thing with year two. But staying focused on not just getting, growing, but growing in that manner that again keeps an eye towards the future of what am I willing to do today? What do I need to do today to consider it successful? But like, what am I still going to be willing to grind out and do in 5 or 10 years from now? Like, how am I setting myself up for that? Because that's the thing that when I look back at the I guess that kind of the archetype of the experience I was going to have if I was at a more traditional brokerage, I don't think I'd be up for that. What I was being coached as to how to run the business, into 10 or 20 years to do for a career. Does that make sense? It felt like there was a cap at like, there's only so many ways people typically operate here, not because they're putting limitations on it, just because I think that was the number of, ways that they typically saw it done. And so I think that's the thing for me that, being here offers, it's a little different, is you have so many different ways to shape this. You have so many different people within EXP, who have decided they love this business and they want to grow, that are, exactly what you'd expect when someone told you about their business as a real estate agent, and then others that are nothing like what you would expect. And that to me is the difficult thing within that is just the right? Like the shiny object kind of thing is right. I see so many people being really successful doing things that I'm thinking, I could do that. And I think that the challenge is always like, that would be great. But what's really success for me? Like what fits me and what gets me to my goals, even though I'm seeing this person do this and kill it, right? Because if you follow every single successful person at any brokerage of any size, you'll spread yourself too thin. And so I think that's the biggest challenge for me is focusing on what is actually going to be successful, and then being very honest with myself about what my comfort level is and what I want to spend my time doing. I think that's the big thing, because you get to where you want to build the pipeline and suddenly you're like, well, I'll do this and that. And you get hung up on the quick result. But then if you stop and think about it, like, do you really want to spend the next few weeks or couple months getting good at that when you know full well that 12 months from now, whatever, there's no way you're going to continue to do it. Right. So that's a big one for me. Right. And I think that's just anyone who's growing a business, along the way, is always trying to make sure, I think, that, they keep their eye on what works for them and what they're actually guiding towards, instead of maybe getting caught up with what others are doing.
Yeah, absolutely. So Adam, man, how has finding success in real estate impacted your life? I mean, I think it'd be really insightful, maybe inspiring for people to hear, like, what difference has it actually made as far as what you've been able to do for yourself, your family? I mean, based on the momentum you've built up in your business so far.
I mean, it accomplished exactly what I wanted, right? It was a lot more freedom as far as where my time went, as far as, and being able to provide at a level that was equal to or greater than where I was before, with much greater upside potential into the future as well. That's the other thing. So, I mean, it was daunting that first year that was partial, where there wasn't, it was one or two closings, like it always is when you make a switch like that, right? But then to go into that next year and have, one of my, better years, if I were to compare it to salaries of the past, and have, meanwhile, like way more freedom in my life and a lot going on. I mean, we've got four kids under 4 years old, right? So to be able to be, producing at that level, but also feel like I'm not gone all the time is tremendous. So to be focused on something that, from a business standpoint, accomplishes that. But then the other thing too is just the excitement, like the future, man. I mean, when I look at, again, when I think of my role in real estate and what I'm doing now, I am perfectly happy and love it. I working with people on the personal side to buy or sell homes, but also, work with a few, investors as well. So I get to do a nice mix. I'd be totally happy doing that for the, rest of my career, if that's the way it goes. But at the same time, I just love, you see so many other opportunities, and I'm blessed to be in a city like Nashville that's growing quite a bit. So, for me, it's always like, what's keeping me intrigued right now and motivated. And then all of us, I mean, everyone's like this, as soon as you get to that next place, you're looking for something more to do. And I think what I love about moving over to real estate is just seeing the breadth of the things that you could focus on, right? And getting involved in development, or getting involved in specifically more niche sides of like investment or, supply side type opportunities. I mean, just that to me is the thing where it's made an immediate impact on life in a really positive way, but it also has given me a runway that, in my opinion, kind of exceeds, at least in terms of my enjoyment, anything else I've ever seen, to be able to accomplish, what we want to accomplish and have the life we want to have. Because again, there's just like, there's so many different ways to do this. He froze up on me again.
That's
man.
A blessing, brother. And I would say that's something that a lot of people watching probably aspire to get to a point where, especially coming off a previous career, that, they can see that kind of traction in their business. But, I firmly believe if someone puts their best foot forward and is really hungry and really is serious and committed and wants to make it happen, and, also does everything they can to put themselves in the best possible environment, community, surrounded themselves with the right people, and equip themselves with the right resources, there's no reason why anyone out there couldn't put themselves in a similar spot to where they have that kind of traction and success going with what they've built in their real estate business.
Absolutely, man.
Having been through the process of knowing what it's like to be active in the industry, no clients, and to go from $0 in real estate to where you've gone today, making a very strong income for your family and being even more excited about the opportunity ahead. What do you say is the biggest breakthrough you had in that whole process? Having seen both sides of that.
Probably just to stop thinking it's not something that can happen to you. Like that's one thing again and again when I talk to agents, especially early on, like when I would go to like a guy like Jay Nelson, like when I talked to him at that night at that bar. I mean, that guy does like incredible volume. I don't even know where he's at, but I know, the number of projects he's involved in and the things he's done. I mean, I would be very happy to be doing a fraction of that, fast forward a few years. And, looking at that, it's easy to kind of always look at folks like that and just and think there's something they've got I don't, or there's somewhere in their trajectory that I just can't replicate. Somehow the conditions were different. And if there's one thing I took away from that conversation from Jay, it was just over and over again, I promise you, man, if I can do it, he kept saying this, if I can do it, you can. If I can, you can. And I think that's one of the things that people need to take home, and not just here, but it's so easy to think it can happen to somebody else and not you. And this is just one of those places where, particularly, at least for right now, and one thing I love about EXP is I think they're in the corner of the independent agent to preserve this is, if you're willing to put the work in, it can certainly be something that happens to you very soon. It is available to you. Just that was the biggest thing. And I feel like I hear that story a lot from people who get into this industry and they surprise themselves with where it goes. And I think that's the theme that the sooner people can get that through their head and not have those kind of other limiting beliefs, the better they'll be. Because I promise you, until 2022 was done, I still don't believe how well it went. It's still tough for me to be like, I can't, it seems surreal given where 2021 ended, like something like, I think I did 2 deals and maybe together they were like $600,000 or $700,000, contract value. So, that's the big one, man. Is like, it's here. Don't tell yourself the wrong stuff. It'll come true.
I love it, man. I love it. Well, man, it's been a phenomenal time chopping it up, brother. Let's leave them with one last thing. Like, is there anything, like, if you could go back to your first day active with the real estate license, first day in the business, knowing what you've learned along the way up to this point, is there anything you'd tell yourself, one piece of advice?
I would tell myself that honestly, that revelation that we just discussed, just from day one, stay focused on yourself, keep doing the work, and tell yourself that it's possible. Don't buy into, because you jump into real estate and everyone's going to tell you all the horror stories about how long it takes to get your first deal and how high the failure rate is and all this kind of stuff. Just once you've made the decision to do it, absolutely just stick to it and do it. Don't be one of the people that takes the potential negative downside to heart. Be aware of it, respect it, use it to keep your business and yourself safe if there's a way to do that, right? Like, but don't internalize it, and just don't believe that. That's the big thing, is starting off day one. It's just the beautiful thing about it. You're nowhere near as prepared to, as somebody who's been in it 10 or 20 years, but you have every bit as much opportunity to go and do exactly what they can do that day. Once you get that license, there's nothing separating you from them. Like you can go talk to the most, snooty, experienced commercial real estate agent in town, and they'll have you on knowledge and probably run circles around you in negotiation. But at the end of the day, you both have the same potential to use that license to help broker something and make something happen for people. And I feel like if you stay focused on that, you will fill in those gaps of knowledge along the way. And do not be afraid of that either. That's the other thing, man. I had some times where, you're making those calls early on, you're worried that people are going to find out what you don't know or whatever. You are bringing the other side of that. You're bringing a dance partner to the dance, man. It doesn't matter how green you are or how many things you could maybe do right. If you're in the right place and you're, using the support you have around you to make sure that it's being done properly, you should I'm sorry, man. With that all around you, you should absolutely be, you shouldn't feel as if you don't belong at the table. That's what I'm trying to say, is you should feel like you belong there. You're bringing the dance partner. And again, like if somebody's got a big listing and they're, the greatest name in your town, it doesn't matter whatsoever. They haven't sold it yet, and you've got somebody that might buy it, or vice versa. And just remember that. Get it done. Everybody will be happy about that. Be professional, and I promise you, the momentum will just keep building. I don't know if that answers your question at all, man, but that's what I'm hearing.
Man, great nugget. So, man, Adam, thank you so much for taking the time to be here, brother. And man, you really poured it on as far as, the insights. And I know it's something that someone out there is going to hear and get the value out of. And, it's going to help them forward on this journey, man. And yeah, I appreciate you, brother. And dude, it's a blessing to be in business with you, my man.
Same here, buddy. I appreciate you, man. I mean, you and Trey being there when I came to you and I was like, look, I know there's something else, and you sticking with me and, waiting me out after I tried to say, I said yes and then kind of said no. And I mean, it was back and forth. And even since then, I mean, you've been a tremendous partner, man. I've always been able to count on giving you a call if I needed help with something. And so it's a two-way street, man. I appreciate you.
Love you, brother. And to our audience, I want to let you know something as well. So Adam, myself, like, we're looking to help. We're looking to partner with great people. So like, if there's anything about Adam's story that you feel like you resonated with, anything about his journey up to this point, I would like to know what we can bring to the table to help you grow and progress on your journey. So do this. If there is anything at all, I'd love to know where you're at in the business today, what your next goal is, and to assess what we can bring to the table to help you get there. So if that's you, go ahead and do this. You'll find my contact information in the description below. Send an email, and I want you to specifically mention Adam West. Let me know that you saw our conversation here. Let me know what it is about it that you feel like you can relate to or that you resonated with, and let me know where you're at in the business today. And you will hear back, and we will look at what we can potentially do to help you get to where it is you're trying to go on this journey ahead. And Adam, last thing, brother, is there a place that if anyone wanted to perhaps follow along on your journey or at least be connected with you somewhere, is there a place that you'd point them towards?
I've got a Facebook page, Adam West Homes. That's probably the best place to go. And then if anybody,
Sweet.
I mean,
So
I'm
Adam
always
West
happy
Homes
to
on Facebook.
Yeah, and if anybody takes you up on reaching out and mention something in the story, I'm always happy to expand on things or talk to people one-on-one. So if they reach out to you and there's something else I can offer, I'm happy to talk one-on-one as well. And you know, obviously if you call me, you know how to get a hold of me.
Of course, brother. And so, yeah, Adam's the guy for Nashville, Tennessee, but we're also here to help those in the business who want to progress and grow. No matter where you're located across the map on that front, we're here to help, and we can, very practically speaking, help you out. But Adam, thank you again, brother, and everyone. Hey, if somehow, some way, after all this, you didn't already subscribe, you already know what to do. Hit that button. Make sure you don't miss what we have in store for you in the future. But with all that being said, thank you for watching, and I'll see you next time. Peace.